how to overcome feeling like an imposter. Welcome to the School of Self-Worth Live. I'm Sam Osborne, the Self-Worth Guy. This is episode 130. And today you are in for a treat because I'm reviewing one of the most popular videos on YouTube. Actually, it's a podcast episode put out by the American Psychological Association. And the podcast is called Speaking of Psychology, and they are doing a topic, how to overcome feeling like an imposter, with Dr. Lisa Orbe Austin and Dr. Kevin Coakley. And this is a really valuable podcast. And I'm just going to give you a bit of a review of what is in this podcast. And then we're going to play just a few snippets from it. But I'm going to give you a little overview right now. So the host is Kim Mills, and she's a great host for the podcast of Speaking of Psychology. They talk about how imposter syndrome is not an illness or a syndrome because of the links to external social influences rather than some sort of, I guess, whatever the criteria is for a mental disease or illness. They talk about who is affected most. They talk about how imposter syndrome affects the lives of people. Then we're going to play it here where the guests talk about their personal experiences, and that will lead into talking about the positives of imposter syndrome, and then we'll get to what advice they give. So let's just have a little listen to what they've got to say. It's really entertaining.
It may seem crazy because I've done fairly well as an academic, and yet I still sometimes look at myself and think, are you really all that your accolades would suggest that you are? I mean, it's crazy. I honestly still struggle with that at times.
It's so not crazy, Kevin. I mean, I was having imposter feelings last night because I was going to be on this podcast with you, and I was like, oh my God, what do I know about imposter syndrome? It's Dr. Coakley.
Yeah, no, it's real. It is very real.
Well, so that raises the question of whether imposter phenomenon can ever have any positive effects. I mean, does it spur people to excel? I think you talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I think that so for example, when I describe what has been documented as the imposter cycle, you'll see that people sort of take these sort of two paths. There's one of over preparation and one of procrastination. For me, it's the path of over preparation. So when I'm, for example, giving a talk on the imposter feelings, I prepare as though I've never given the talk before, as though I haven't given dozens and dozens and dozens of the talks, so much so that my partner says to me, Kevin, why are you spending so much time preparing? Like, you know this like the back of your hand. Yes, I do. But I never want people to sort of hear me and to think he does not know what he's talking about. So I really over prepare. And so I think what happens with people who experience imposterism is that they will sort of go the extra mile. They will work extra hard to try to, sort of do well, whatever the task is. And so I think in that sense, it can have a positive effect. But again, I want to make sure that you understand that oftentimes it's coupled with, the negative impact that it has on one's sort of well-being.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great point. Like, there's always, like, as I'm sort of in recovery of my own imposter syndrome, I'm always working to check myself around the overwork and over-functioning that has done me well. I went to an Ivy League college, I did all those things. But I think that it has had such negative other aspects that I've come to recognize that I can be successful without thinking that everyone's going to think I'm a fraud, and that those skills still exist within me, whether I think I'm a fraud or not. And that I think it's so much better if I just proceed forward as if I'm not a fraud, because I think it'll be better for me a long term. And it reminds me of something my husband said to me when I was trying to break out of my imposter syndrome. And he said, like, if you work as hard for yourself as you do for others, you're going to be unstoppable. And part of my work was around really learning how to work in that effort for myself, as opposed for proving myself, as opposed to making people like me and all this other stuff. And I did it because of things I was invested in, I was interested in, that I wanted to do. I think it was a much better investment of my energy in that direction. But it's a constant battle.
So I really recommend you go and listen to that whole podcast episode, How to Overcome Feeling Like an Imposter. By the podcast is called Speaking of Psychology. And just to give you a little bit of a review, so the advice they go on to say is that, well, group therapy is a good idea. Kevin says that you should attend and acknowledge and document the things that you've done well to counter the discounting of yourself. You know, when you downplay yourself, when imposter syndrome feelings come on, you discount the things that you're actually really good at. And he says to start a weekly diary and just write down the things that you did well that week, and also to prioritize your self-care so that you can deal with your negative thoughts and the cycle of imposter syndrome, and ask for help. Just a classic piece of advice and truth. Ask for help, people. If you've got imposter syndrome, reach out. Build a community so you don't go it alone, and you can join the School of Self-Worth Facebook group. There's a community. And Lisa recommends to help people. Well, she says she helps people to identify early experiences, their history, to see where the imposter syndrome comes from, because essentially she says it didn't come from nowhere. So if you look into your history, you're going to find that there's going to be some insights for you. They talk about the relationships to other mental health. There's research says that imposter syndrome does lead to more feelings of anxiety and depression, but the treatment of anxiety and depression doesn't necessarily improve imposter syndrome. They ended the conversation with the roles that institutions and companies can play to help out with this. And they made this really interesting point that one of the things people say in the workplace to reduce imposter syndrome is to say, just do an adequate job. But commissions and bonuses are not linked to adequate jobs. They're linked to exceeding in the job. And when people who suffer from imposter syndrome try to exceed, that's when imposter syndrome can seem to come on. So that can lead to burnout. And so Kevin and Lisa were talking about how the culture needs to change in a workplace, and that can be really hard. But one of the best things Kevin says was that managers should come out and admit when they drop the ball, and that, you know, making mistakes is going to be part of being in business or being in the workplace. And then Lisa says they should have a post-mortem discussion on the mistake so that people can learn together. And that's a really great application of growth mindset and promoting mental health and well-being in the workplace. So lots of great things there in that podcast. Really glad I checked that one out. I'm going to put the links in the video after this. If you've enjoyed this video, I've got a free gift for you. It's called Crush Imposter Syndrome Forever, the starter kit for bulletproof confidence. Going to help you to crush imposter syndrome, going to help you to overcome it and beat it. You can get it in the links below or above, and it's on your screen right now, samosborn.com/starter kit. And I invite you to join the School of Self-Worth Facebook group. Come and say hi, get the support you need to overcome imposter syndrome. I wish everybody a great day. See ya.